Hey everyone, welcome to Sound Theory Academy. I'm David, and in today's video, we're going to talk about species counterpoint. Species counterpoint is a methodology for teaching counterpoint that's been around for hundreds of years. Composers like Bach and Beethoven and Mozart and Ravel, all of these composers learned counterpoint through this process known as species counterpoint. The kind of species counterpoint that we're talking about today was kind of codified by someone named Johannes Fuchs, who published a book in 1725 called The Steps to Parnassus, or Gradus ad Parnassum. In this book, Fuchs talks about these different approaches, these different levels of doing counterpoint, which he called the species. This term may have been around for a long time before that, but he kind of codified it in this book. So the idea of species counterpoint is that we are limiting the options that the composer can use when they're writing lines against other lines. That's what counterpoint is multiple lines that are working together, that are both independent but creating a harmonious whole. So what the species counterpoint does is gives you these different stages or levels that you can apply counterpoint to a given melody. That given melody is called the cantus firmus. And the way that species counterpoint works is that each level you write counterpoint against a cantus firmus. So a given voice is always supplied to you, and you provide the counterpoint given the restrictions of each of the species. And all of the species can use the same cantus firmus. Here are some examples of cantus firmus melodies. Notice how simple they are. They're all in whole notes, and they all kind of have a similar arc, where they go up, they go down, they have a little bit of variety with their shape, but they're primarily there just to give a really basic, simple structure. And then when you're working out counterpoint through the species, you're writing an additional line that works in tandem with this line. Okay, so now let's talk about the different species. The first species is one-to-one counterpoint, where you supply one note to every note of the cantus firmus. In this species, you are only allowed to use consonant intervals, meaning no dissonances are allowed. This species introduces us to 3 of the 4 types of contrapuntal motion. We have parallel motion, contrary motion, and similar motion. So what this species is really aiming to do is challenge the composer to create a really simple structure with a very smooth and clear line, but only using consonances. Let's take a listen to an example of first species counterpoint. In the second species, we can start to write more complex melodies, though these are still relatively simple, given the fact that we can only write 2 notes to every 1 note of the cantus firmus. Second species counterpoint introduces the composer to dissonances, but they're very controlled, they're very contained. You can only write dissonances as passing tones and neighbor tones, but that's all that you have access to. The challenge of second species is really about only using the allowed dissonances as passing and neighbor tones, and it introduces us to a new type of contrapuntal motion, oblique motion, where one voice moves and the other one stays the same. In third species counterpoint, we now write either 3 or 4 notes to the given cantus firmus. And in this species, we're introduced to many more types of dissonances. We have the double neighbor tone, we have the accented passing tone and accented neighbor tone, we have the appoggiatura, we have the nota cambiata, and a few others. The real challenge of the third species is creating a convincing melodic line when you have all of these notes. You really want to aim for a very smooth and connected line, And that's sometimes difficult to do when you have to write many notes against a cantus firmus. Remember, we're writing melodies, so arpeggiating chords is not really going to create a very convincing counterpoint here. So the challenge is to use stepwise motion and to make connected lines with all of the notes that we have at our disposal. Okay, in fourth species counterpoint, we pare down the complexity a little bit, and now we're back to only using 2 notes to every 1 note of the cantus firmus. In this species, we are introduced to a new type of dissonance, which is called the suspension. In this type of dissonance, we have dissonances that fall on strong beats and then they resolve by step. This species is also known sometimes as syncopation because what it really is taking 1-to-1 counterpoint from first species and offsetting our counterpoint by half of a measure. So what we see is the resolution of all our dissonances are on the second half of the measure. Okay, and finally we have fifth species counterpoint. This is called florid counterpoint, and in this type of counterpoint, we're allowed to use all of the species together. And it's really the closest we come to writing original music with species counterpoint. We still have the given line, the cantus firmus, but now we're challenged to intermix all of the species so that we can create rhythmically appealing melodies against that cantus firmus. This species really challenges the composer to introduce textural variety in the line. And once you've mastered species counterpoint in all of these 5 species, you're ready to start writing your own counterpoint in forms like fugues and canons and inventions. And you can really start to use all of this to create original music that is really well structured in its counterpoint. So that's species counterpoint. Put in the comments below which species you're most interested in learning, because I want to show you in some future videos how we can go from first species all the way to florid counterpoint so that you can write your own contrapuntal music. And if you got value out of this video, please do give it a thumbs up. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.